All right, so let's talk a little bit about framing answers to situational interview questions using the STAR method. All right, it's a very simple concept. Basically, what you're going to do is whenever they ask this open-ended question to you, they're probing to see how you think and how you're going to respond. And by practicing this technique, using this with every one of these answers, you will become, over time, very proficient with a very consistent and high quality response. Okay, now, the STAR technique starts with the S, right? S as in the situation. You're going to begin to explain where you were whenever the subject took place. So I might say, when I was a junior Scrum Master and I was working at, and then I would say the company, okay? You're setting up the context. You might also say, I had the responsibility of stabilizing 3 troubled teams or whatever it is. You're giving the original situation, your role, and some of the responsibilities and accountability that you had. Now, the T is the task. This probably also is the trouble that you're having, the problem that you've got, okay? So, when I was a junior Scrum Master, I was working in this company. I was responsible for stabilizing 3 teams. One of my teams was new and was struggling to stabilize. They couldn't predict what they would get done in a sprint. So sometimes they would take on 50 points and complete 30. Then they take on 30 and complete 40. Then they take on 30 and complete 15. They were all over the place. So I realized that we needed to find a solution. Now, the A is, what action did you take? All right. We talked about it during our retrospective to find out what the possible causes were. How you talk about this, by the way, will indicate what your coaching stance is. We'll come to that in another topic, but are you instructing and telling them this is your problem and this is the solution? That is one technique. It's not always the best. Are you coaching and you're asking questions? What do you guys think could be going on? Could it be the way we size stories? Could it be the way that we focus on stories? Are we swarming stories? Or are we assigning them individually? And the team came back and they said, well, we agree with you that the story points we're using probably don't mean anything. We don't really understand this. The other one might be that they said that the product owner is changing the scope. We start off with these 5 stories. Each one of them's 5 points. And 2 days into it, they change the stories around and now we're not ready. Okay, so that's an interruption and it limits our focus. And maybe what they discover is that there were defects that were involved. Too many defects being created. Now, as part of this action, then, you've just stated, well, we had this learning, this conversation, we discovered these things. The next part of that I'm looking for is, so what did you do about it? So we came up with a shared understanding of story points. I walked them through a story pointing exercise and helped them to normalize the points so everyone could agree. This is a 1, a 2, a 3, a 5, an 8, a 13, etc. The other thing was we talked to the product owner and he or she agreed to, once the sprint starts, to leave the scope alone and to minimize any kind of changes unless it's an absolute production issue, okay? High severity. And then the last thing is that in order to address the defects, we instituted pair coding so that we would make sure that someone was always doing code review and collaborating on the code for quality. And we saw our defects drop very quickly. All right. And I just jumped straight into, and so what was the result? That's the R. STAR. We immediately stabilized. The team became more confident. They were able to predict how many stories they would get done. Their velocity trends stabilized. And they were able to increase velocity since they had more focus and fewer defects. That's it. That's the STAR technique. Now, what you want to do is practice that over and over again in your head, out loud, in front of a mirror for the situational questions. That's how you get good.